The Hetmanate's Brief Glory: How Ukraine Lost Its Autonomy. What if a nation won its freedom, built its own government, negotiated with empires, and then watched all of it vanish in a single imperial decree? That's exactly what happened to the Cossack Hetmanate in 1764. The Cossack Hetmanate was a semi-autonomous Ukrainian polity that emerged in the mid-17th century. Its leader, the hetman, held both military and civil authority over a territory covering what is now central Ukraine. For a brief period in the 17th century, the Cossack Hetmanate operated as a genuine state, issuing its own laws, conducting its own diplomacy, fielding its own armies. Not a vassal, not a province, a functioning polity. Three colossal powers encircled this new state: the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth to the west, the Ottoman Empire to the south, the Tsardom of Russia to the northeast. Each had ambitions the Hetmanate couldn't ignore. The Cossacks weren't simply soldiers. They were a frontier society, skilled cavalry, river navigators, administrators who'd carved a distinct identity from the borderlands between settled empires and open steppe. In 1648, Hetman Bogdan Khmelnytsky led a massive uprising against Polish rule. Within 2 years, his forces had shattered Polish armies and established the Hetmanate as a functioning political entity across central Ukraine. Victory created an immediate problem. The Hetmanate was too small to stand alone against 3 empires at once. Khmelnytsky needed a powerful patron, and every available option carried a hidden price. In 1654, the Hetmanate signed the Treaty of Pereyaslav with Tsar Alexis of Russia. On paper, it was a military alliance. In practice, it handed Moscow a legal foothold inside Ukrainian territory that Russia would never relinquish. None of the 3 surrounding powers wanted a genuinely independent Ukrainian state on their borders. Russia, Poland, and the Ottomans each worked, sometimes together, sometimes in competition, to keep the Hetmanate dependent. Between 1657 and 1687, the Hetmanate collapsed into what historians call the ruin. A civil war fueled by competing hetmans, each backed by a different foreign power, seeking control over Ukrainian territory. Here's the counterintuitive twist: the Cossack Hetmanate wasn't destroyed by military conquest. Its autonomy was liquidated through administrative and legal maneuvers. Russia's strategic interests dressed in bureaucratic language. After Hetman Ivan Mazepa allied with Sweden's Charles XII against Russia at Poltava in 1709 and lost, Tsar Peter the Great imposed sweeping restrictions on Hetmanate autonomy, punishing the entire institution for one leader's gamble. Peter I created the Little Russia College in 1722, a Russian administrative body designed to override the hetman's authority. The Hetmanate still appeared on maps. Real power had already shifted to St. Petersburg. The Hetmanate's disappearance can't be blamed on a single bad decision. The structural reality was that Russia's interests in Eastern Europe were incompatible with the existence of a genuinely autonomous Ukrainian state. The decisive blow came from Empress Catherine II. In 1764, she issued an imperial order abolishing the office of hetman entirely. The Cossack Hetmanate, which had survived a century of war and diplomacy, was erased by a single administrative act. Catherine II didn't act impulsively. She appointed the last hetman herself, Kirylo Rozumovsky, then removed him when the political moment suited her. The dissolution was choreographed, not reactive. After abolition, the Hetmanate's territory was reorganized into the Little Russia Governorate, a standard Russian provincial unit. The name alone erased the concept of a distinct Ukrainian political identity from official imperial language. Calling the region Little Russia wasn't a neutral geographic label. It was a calculated imperial framing, positioning Ukraine as a subordinate part of a greater Russian whole, not as a distinct political or cultural entity. The 1654 Treaty of Pereyaslav, signed by the Hetmanate seeking military protection, gave Russia the legal and symbolic foundation it needed to eventually claim the entire territory as its own internal affair. The Hetmanate's collapse wasn't a series of accidents or miscalculations. Historian Serhiy Plokhy, in his landmark work on Cossack statehood, argues directly that Russia systematically dismantled Hetmanate institutions as a matter of deliberate imperial policy, not reactive self-defense. The trap was built into the alliance from the start. The Hetmanate's story fits a precise regional pattern. In 1711, Moldavian ruler Dmitry Cantemir signed the Treaty of Lutsk with Peter I, seeking Russian military protection against the Ottomans. Within months, Russia's defeat at the Pruth River left Cantemir in exile, and Moldavia firmly back under Ottoman control. Seeking a great power protector had cost him everything, a dynamic the Hetmanate knew intimately. The Ottoman Empire's presence to the south wasn't passive. Ottoman pressure on the Hetmanate's southern flank forced successive hetmans to prioritize military survival over institutional consolidation, leaving the state perpetually exposed. Poland, the power the Hetmanate revolted against in 1648, never accepted Ukrainian autonomy. Polish diplomatic pressure worked alongside Russian ambition to keep the Hetmanate in a permanent state of contested legitimacy. The Hetmanate's experience reveals a hard geopolitical truth. Autonomy guaranteed only by a treaty with a stronger neighbor is autonomy on borrowed time. Structural power asymmetry eventually overrides written agreements. This dynamic didn't end in the 18th century. Francis Fukuyama's 1992 argument in The End of History that liberal democracy had triumphed and great power rivalry was finished led Western policymakers to treat Russia as a partner in integration rather than a structural imperial actor. NATO's 1997 founding act with Russia formalized that assumption. Both proved wrong for the same reason the Hetmanate's patrons proved wrong. Structural imperial interests outlast any single agreement. Russia's interests in Eastern Europe have remained structurally consistent across centuries. The absorption of the Hetmanate wasn't an aberration. It was an expression of a geopolitical logic that has outlasted Tsars, Soviets, and republics alike. Picture this. November 1764, Kyrylo Rozumovsky, the last hetman, receives a formal imperial summons to St. Petersburg. He arrives expecting negotiation. He leaves without his title. The Hetmanate ceases to exist in that meeting. For ordinary Cossacks, abolition meant the end of military exemptions, traditional land rights, and local legal customs built over a century. The Little Russia Governorate replaced all of it with standard Russian provincial administration. The most striking fact remains this. No army marched on the Hetmanate capital in 1764. No battle ended it. A bureaucratic order issued in St. Petersburg dissolved a century of Cossack political identity without a single military engagement. We opened with a question. What happens when a nation wins its freedom and then watches it vanish in a single decree? The Cossack Hetmanate answers that question with painful precision across 116 years of history. Here's the concrete evidence that abolition was incomplete. When the Russian Empire collapsed in 1917, Ukrainian political leaders didn't invent new institutions from scratch. They revived the title of hetman directly. Pavlo Skoropadsky was proclaimed hetman of Ukraine in April 1918, 154 years after Catherine the Great declared the office permanently extinct. The institutional vocabulary survived the institution itself. The Hetmanate story is a precise case study in how great powers absorb smaller neighbors. Not always through war, but through treaties, administration, and naming. Understanding that mechanism is the first step to recognizing it when it happens again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more.